mezzo al rumore serve qualcosa che duri.
Il Papa Leon XIV.
Storie vere. Incontri che cambiano la vita. Persone che costruiscono. Uno sguardo originale su ciò che accade. Tutto questo è Tracce. Ora anche in una nuova versione digitale, per raccontare sempre più storie di gente che vive. Tracce, la rivista internazionale di Comunione e Liberazione.
Consorzio La Cascina. Ristorazione, global service, costruzioni, servizi alla persona. Promuoviamo l'impresa mutualistica e il benessere della comunità. I numeri di una grande realtà. Oltre 650 milioni di fatturato, più di 16.000 lavoratori. Vivenda. Ristorazione per mense scolastiche, ospedali, aziende e comunità. Global service. La Cascina Costruzioni. Realizziamo come impresa o general contractor infrastrutture e grandi opere edilizie. Medi Hospice. Assistenza, accoglienza, cura. Da sempre al fianco dei più fragili. Consorzio La Cascina. Cuore da cooperativa, testa da impresa.
In mezzo al rumore serve qualcosa che duri.
Il Papa Leon XIV.
Storie vere. Incontri che cambiano la vita. Persone che costruiscono. Uno sguardo originale su ciò che accade. Tutto questo è Tracce. Ora anche in una nuova versione digitale, per raccontare sempre più storie di gente che vive. Tracce, la rivista internazionale di Comunione e Liberazione.
Consorzio La Cascina. Ristorazione, global service, costruzioni, servizi alla persona. Promuoviamo l'impresa mutualistica e il benessere della comunità. I numeri di una grande realtà. Oltre 650 milioni di fatturato, più di 16.000 lavoratori. Vivenda. Ristorazione per mense scolastiche, ospedali, aziende e comunità. Global service. La Cascina Costruzioni. Realizziamo come impresa o general contractor infrastrutture e grandi opere edilizie. Medi Hospice. Assistenza, accoglienza, cura. Da sempre al fianco dei più fragili. Consorzio La Cascina. Cuore da cooperativa, testa da impresa. Consorzio La Cascina. Ristorazione, global service, costruzioni, servizi alla persona. Promuoviamo l'impresa mutualistica e il benessere della comunità. I numeri di una grande realtà. Oltre 650 milioni di fatturato, più di 16.000 lavoratori. Vivenda. Ristorazione per mense scolastiche, ospedali, aziende e comunità. Global service. La Cascina Costruzioni. Realizziamo come impresa o general contractor infrastrutture e grandi opere edilizie. Medi Hospes. Assistenza, accoglienza, cura. Da sempre al fianco dei più fragili. Consorzio La Cascina. Cuore da cooperativa, testa da impresa.
Questo è un luogo che genera dialogo,
Qualcuno che si impegna, che si batte.
che approfondisce la conoscenza e sostiene la fiducia. È un crocevia dove si incontra chi desidera il vero, il bello, il giusto e il bene. È una testimonianza di speranza nel cuore ferito del presente. E tutto questo
Proporre con la propria vita.
esiste anche grazie a te.
Buonasera a tutti.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this session that closes this edition of the meeting for friendship among the people. So what does it mean to look at the sky of Jerusalem? But we're going to see that this means look at reality profoundly, not just the conflict in the Middle East and the Holy Land, but more generally the conflicts tearing down the world. So this goes back to the pastoral letter wrote by Cardinal Pizzaballa to his diocese at the end of April. So we thank the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem for joining us for this final session.
Non ha bisogno di
He doesn't need any presentation. This letter that Cardinal Pizzaballa wrote, They Returned to Jerusalem with Great Joy, is the title. As been described as a painstaking spiritual synthesis of his journey as a shepherd, in particular over the last 3 years, these last 3 years of war tearing the Holy Land. We know that this war has extended to surrounding countries, but also to Gulf countries. And there is a fil rouge in the letter that the Cardinal wrote. What does it mean to live as Christians among this, in the middle of this conflict, for which no end is in sight, because we do not see for the time being a solution. So the Cardinal's call is for authentic dialogue, free from censorship, free from fear. So just about the reality of the facts, and so it's a call for authentic dialogue for the whole world. And Jerusalem, as he writes in his letter, is a city belonging to everybody. It belongs to all the people, and it has a prophetic role to play, especially in these very difficult times. And in particular, he addresses the younger generations who are growing up in this world marked by this chaos, this disorder at global level. So all rules seems to be off, not just the rules of international relations, but also among people, so relations among individuals at any level. So we risk to live in self-referential bubbles, and social media seem to amplify this effect. This evening, we have some young people who will talk with Cardinal Pizzaballa, 3 young people from different backgrounds and with different life stories. And we have Lucia, Grant, and Kirill. Because we really wanted to listen to the questions that they prepared. So young people coming from different backgrounds, walks of life, and so we really want to hear to their words. So I give the floor to them immediately, and they will also make a brief self-introduction and then talk with Cardinal Pizzaballa, that we thank once again for being here with us this evening. Good evening, everybody. My name is Lucia Salerno, and I've just finished attending high school in Milan over these last 5 years. I had the possibility to join Gioventù Studentesca and prepare and disseminate the exhibition Prophecies for Peace that was exhibited here last year in Rimini at the meeting, and Cardinal Pizzaballa gave a meaningful contribution. And to me, working on this exhibition was crucial because we told stories of peace that took place in context of conflict. It seemed impossible to see love bloom. I would like to start with my first question. So, Your Eminence, could you please help us understand the situation today in the Holy Land? And in particular, in this regard, I also recall that in last year's exhibition, you talked about peace as an experience of love that overwhelms us and let us go over conflicts. And so with respect to this, so when it comes to global politics, is it possible to reach such peace? It seems utopian to think that governments might act for the good of the most vulnerable of the people. So they seem to me to be in 2 entirely different orders of magnitude and of peace. Thank you. Well, I think that we really need to avoid to reduce peace to a slogan. And also, we need to avoid being naive. I'm thinking about any complex reality, not just a reality in the Middle East. Politics is also made of balances, of interests, of safety, of power relations, of force relations. Politics is also made of all of these things. So politics is not free from these dynamics. Instead, these dynamics are part of it. The problem is when politics becomes just this, and political action is reduced only to specific interests and force-based relations. We saw that in the Middle East, and not just there. Well, now, so the emerging narrative is that of force, of power, not just military speaking. I'm more general when I say this. So if politics is reduced just to power, well, then we see the extent of the problems that this generates, not just in the Middle East, but in the whole world. So peace instead is a complex process, also requiring political action that is also made of political dynamics. What is important is that somebody should always raise their voice and remind everybody of the beneficiaries of the work done by politicians. So the common good, that's the ultimate goal of politics. This should never be forgotten without being naive and without denying such power relations. In the Middle East, this is the problem, because, and I wrote that in my letter, so the sense of common good has been completely lost. Political institutions seem to be driven only by their own interests. That's the impression we have. So this sense of common good has been lost, the common good for the people in general. And this is a major issue. And this is a major issue also for religious leaders and pastors. And we should remind that. And so John the Baptist said that too. So we need to take responsibility of reminding this. We cannot just delegate to politicians, because then, well, it's not just about the political actions taken by, people in governments, but it's also the civil society, it's also people in communities. So it's not just about a top-down approach, but also it's about a bottom-up approach. We should never forget that. And political institutions at all levels show their weaknesses, show their inability to understand and work for the common good. They seem unable to change their language, their narrative, and we see that very clearly, and we see its consequences. But we should also remember that civil society determines also a certain kind of politics, and not everything is lost. So in Palestinian, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, civil societies, there is still a certain resilience. There's a livelihood. There is an ability to commit, to engage. And so that's why I'm pretty optimistic at the end of the day, after all.
Good evening, everyone. It is a great joy to be with you all today. I'd like to express a quick thanks to Alessandra, to my mom, who is in the crowd, to Dr. Aaron Riches, to the Rimini organizers for their support to get me where I am today. My name is Grant Eberly. I come and live in the United States of America. I come and live in the state of Kansas, in the small but mighty city of Atchison. I come on behalf of my GS group. We are the largest in America, and we are about 20 to 30 high schoolers that meet every Thursday in the Abbey of our town. So the questions I come and ask before you today are in the voice of all of my GS group. When reading your letter, we were struck by all of the experiences and pain you've witnessed. So our question is simple. How do you remain hopeful every day and steadfast in the events you encounter? How are you not crushed by them?
A simple question, but the answer is not simple. It is true that talking about hope in our thorn context, so full of hatred and rancor, and pain to all extent. The whole Holy Land is affected by this. In particular, considering fragile prospects, make it difficult to talk about hope. It's like people are beating around the bush. So first, we may say what hope is not. We don't want to identify hope as a solution to problems, because we don't see that into the horizon. We have to be realistic. It will take a lot of time before something really happens, because the situation is so undermined, not on a political level, but also in terms of the perception that is present in the different parts of the society. And above all, hope should not be just waiting for something that is going to come from the outside. Hope comes from the inside, from the heart. It is a way of seeing reality. It is the daughter of faith, I always say. Hope is a presence. It is the awareness of not being alone. One is not alone. One has not been abandoned. And the presence in faith, in the encounter with Christ, is what supports you, what gives you hope. And then this presence is found within the population. I mentioned before civil society. Civil society is an abstract concept, but then you meet people, faces, associations, communities that are so active and so present and so convinced. People as young as you, but even adult people, retired people that just put themselves at stake to do something together. Then it is true that violence and war make a lot of noise, but there's also a lot of beautiful context, beautiful realities. The last time I was in Gaza, I visited our parish in Gaza, and normally we go to see the different Catholic associations, Caritas, and other people. And the people there insisted to go and visit the university, a public university. It's called Lazar, but it's a state university. It's not linked to any radical movement, really. I didn't feel like going there because we didn't have enough time. And, you know, you never know how things might be there. People you may meet. I need to save the balance, but they insisted so much. There was the vice chancellor, there were some students, so then I accepted to go. You know, I was told so many different things that it wouldn't make a difference at that point. So I went there, and the encounter there was really nice, very stimulating. There were more than 600 young people that committed themselves to recover what remained of the university. They wanted to start their studies again, and I received so many questions, and no question was about war. The questions concerned my personal experience, Christianity, relations, life. It was really interesting. I was expecting political issues, but no, not at all. By the way, there was a young guy, Ahmad something, he was a Muslim person, who prepared the question in Latin. If I go to our pontifical universities, I believe they wouldn't be able to ask a question in Latin at all. But in one answer, I said very clearly and very directly that for us, Christians, we refuse any kind of violence, any form of violence. I couldn't finish this sentence that everybody stood up to applaud, and they wanted to say, we want to stop violence too. Consider that those young people lost their home, they had casualties in their families, but they all stood up to say, fair enough, we have enough of violence of any kind, of any form. When we think of Gaza, we always think of death and destruction, but there is a lot of life there. Those young people are full of life. They desire life. And that's a source of hope, because that tells you that as long as there's people that are committed in this way, in this kind of life, hope is still there. And then, one last thing, prayer. Prayer won't change geopolitics in the Middle East, but it will change my vision of geopolitics. And then prayer helps me put some order in my inner life, in my personal life. And prayer, above all, reminds me that it's not me leading history.
Buonasera a tutti.
Good evening, everybody. I am Kirill. I attend a scientific high school in Rimini, and I come from Ukraine, and my grandparents live there in a city called Kriwero, and I joined the Prophecies for Peace exhibition, and I really got carried away by this topic, and in particular, spreading the peace in the world is what carried me away the most. So my question is the following. In the first part of your letter, you dwell on the physical and moral devastation caused by the conflict in the Middle East. This is a critical aspect that we see in other parts of the world, including Ukraine, a place that is very dear to my heart. So I'd like to know how we can generate hope in young people that need to go and fight at the front. I cannot go and see my grandparents because I would risk to be enrolled in the army, and so I could somehow risk my life, my entire life. Well, it is true that war destroys, but war also steals. It steals young people the best years of their lives. And the worse is that steals also their lives, their existences, dreams, future horizons. This applies to Ukraine, but also to the Middle East. I mean, nobody wants to fight a war, to go to the front. And there is a danger. War is made of specific dynamics. It has its own dynamics. And war dynamics, really mesmerize people. And it brutalizes people. Because, it generates so much hatred among people. So the dynamic of war is terrible because it dehumanizes people. It deprives them of their humanity. And I had people of my diocese that were called to fight the war. I talked with the Bishop of Kharkiv today, and so I know that he has, is parishioners that are all on one side. Instead, I have parishioners from both sides in my parish in Gaza. So it's even more complicated. So we had Catholic soldiers dead in Gaza. I had parishioners dead in Gaza. So to me, the reality is so complex. War is horrible, definitely. I have no solutions. And I really don't have a clue in this respect. But what is most important is that these dynamics do not become something embedded in a person's soul. The logic of war should not possess the conscience of a person. A person should always remain free inside. So these diminishing, dehumanizing logic of the war should never, ever overwhelm an individual. I know that a soldier that is fighting at the front needs to somehow adapt to that dynamic. But again, in spite of the pain and the suffering, that person should always remain human inside, never accept what is happening. So we need to remain human. That's the most important thing, even if you're fighting at the front.
You mentioned in the letter that we need to recognize the other as a human being, that we need to see them as... that we need to avoid seeing them as the enemy. Because when they are the enemy, everything becomes permissible. For me, I struggle with this. How do I see the other as a human, made in the image and likeness of God? How do I affirm something positive in the other? And also, connected to this question, is the question of how I view myself. I see many of my trials in my life as unique and absolute, as you say in your letter, that nobody knows what I experience and nobody has the life that I have. So how do I also avoid seeing myself as a victim?
It is a real problem in the Holy Land. Everybody feels they are a victim and the sole victim. And this is a vicious cycle. And then the other turns into the enemy or is dehumanized. We've seen that in the language too, with very harsh and violent expressions. I always believe that the very first violence starts with heart and words. Violent language also nurtures a culture of violence that then turns into physical violence, and it permits it and that justifies it in some way. Unfortunately, we are fully inside something like this. We are living it into the flesh of our communities in a very clear and evident way. So how is it possible to avoid falling in such a vicious cycle? Meeting. We tend to categorize people, the Italians, the Palestinians, the Jewish, the Muslims, the Christians, the believers, the non-believers, and so on and so forth. These are all categories. And that's very simple. It's very easy to make abstractions. But meeting a person, a face, a name, means meeting a story, meeting emotions, meeting relations. And this changes the perspective. And this helps you not to generalize. The Jews are not all the same. The Christians are not all the same, and so on and so forth. I think this is something really important. And it is also very important to consider that feeling to be the sole victim is one of the main problems that we are experiencing in the Holy Land right now. What makes it so difficult is that it seems like everybody defines themselves in their being a victim. I am what the other has done to me. But I am something else too. I'm not just what the other has done to me. It's necessary to break this, to get out of this. And to do this, we need testimonies. We need testimonies in our communities that can keep this testimony alive, that it is possible to go beyond barriers. Barriers are there. We don't have to be naive. The barriers are there, but they don't have to be closed barriers, closed frontiers, impermeable barriers. We need people that can break through, and little by little, then we can extend these openings. That's very necessary, because insofar as one feels the sole victim and the other is the bad, then we will keep sticking to this vicious cycle. And to do this, the only way is to meet the other persons.
Sua Eminenza, intorno a noi.
His Eminence, I have the impression that all around us there is just chaos. There is a lot of propaganda, there are fake news, and the news flow is so fast. So how can we somehow understand what is happening? What criteria should we use? Who should we listen to? I would also like to know that. Well, first and foremost, well, it's not easy at all for anyone. And then, you know, there are social media, there are the big networks. I think that it's important to listen to several voices. Well, often, well, because of algorithms, and you know what I'm talking about, algorithm, I mean, submit to you what the algorithm thinks that you like the most. So you should listen to several voices, also the voices you do not agree with, because then you keep your attention and your intelligence alert, because you also consider other points of view, other perspectives. So always try to listen to several voices. Another important thing is to assess the language of what you're reading. Is it aggressive? Is that controversial? I would leave that aside. Okay, you can read that, but I mean, take all that carefully, because that kind of language is not helpful at all. And then you will define little by little your own criteria. If you read aggressive, dehumanizing language, I would pay attention. But it's a work in progress, ever. It's a continuous work to be done. And especially when it comes to the Middle East, that, I mean, it's such a complicated place. You have everything and the opposite of everything. Nothing is as it seems. So really, really complex. It's a conundrum. I remember a professor that used to start all conferences on the Middle East like this. So I'll try to explain to you the Holy Land and the Middle East as the best as I can. So at the end of the lecture, you will say, oh, I understood everything. That means that I didn't do well my job, because it is so complex that if you think you have understood everything, it can't be true. You need to be humble. So no presumption, no preposterousness. You need to be able to listen to several voices and avoid being judgmental.
Your Eminence, you write about us experiencing pain. That pain often isolates us or opens us up. Maybe it is the death of a loved one or seeing a friend go through pain, but it has this effect. With the pain you've experienced in the Holy Land, how has it shaped you in recent years? And how have you remained steadfast in the face of evil that always seems to prevail?
Well, here it is a bit of a personal question. Fair enough. We have been affected by so much pain. Pain that can be visible, but pain that can also get inside you. It's pain because of broken relations, because you may have said something that people didn't like, or pain for people that have disappeared, or for the violence you witness, or for your sense of lack of power to do something, sense of impotence. Well, pain, first of all, makes you feel somehow inadequate, that you are not up to the standards to face a certain situation. It makes you understand that you can't do it all. In my role, sometimes people have expectations that you get into every single situation to bring a contribution, but you understand that you can't reach everywhere, every place. Even if you wanted, there are places where you can't go because you would generate expectations that would remain unmet, and so you risk generating further pain. So all this gets inside you. And one can't always face that situation. It's a human thing. I'm not a superhero. And here is where prayer is important, because it is the only place where you can offer that impotence that you have, this powerlessness that you have, and especially by looking at the cross. Because the cross is the place where Jesus fails humanely, but for us it is a source of salvation, and from there our salvation comes. The cross and resurrection, of course, but the cross to begin with. That helps you set things in the right proportion. And then, when sometimes you can't stand it anymore or you fall, it's important to remember that even when you fall, even when you can't stand it, there is a place you can go back to. And it's not really over, because looking at him, you can always start again. That is the consolation that you have, that you can meet through the many people that love you. One thing must be remembered all the time. Above all, in pain, not being left alone. And that applies to Israeli people, to Palestinian people, everybody. Empathy. More than words, what counts is being present, being there. And that applies even to cardinals.
Sua Eminenza.
His Eminence, in your letter, you speak of the importance of purifying the memory. In particular, I would like to ask you this. Could you clarify this concept and its implications, please? At school, we have studied, to some extent, the historical origins of this conflict, how it evolved over the years. So how can we contribute, considering the complexity So referring to the process you described. Well, what I said about the redemption, the purification of memory, refers to Pope John Paul II and the preparation to the Jubilee of year 2000, and that topic was part of that preparation work. I was a young priest at the time, and I was so struck by that concept. It is a very important topic, probably one of the most controversial parts of my letter. Yes, I had many critics. To me, this is one of the most crucial parts. First of all, purifying the memory, it doesn't mean forgetting the past, not at all. We should not forget the past, but I may have a past made of injustice and pain and suffering, but that pain, that past should not become the standard, the prism through which I see and read my present, my reality. That means that everything that happened to me, everything that I experienced, me and my people, should never ever become the only possible interpretation of the present. So that cannot justify violent choices of today. So there are events that are somehow interpreted according to different historic narratives, but it's important also to acknowledge the historic point of view of somebody else, the historic narrative of the other. And maybe I can disagree, but I should not deny the story interpretation of another person. So when I said purifying the memory, I meant this. And this is decisive because we absolutely need to prevent any wrong interpretation of our historic memory to justify hatred-based choices for future generations. We should never, ever generate resentment. We need to remember, but that memory should become a possibility for newer generations, the possibility to do something different and to do something better, so to improve with respect to the previous generation. So we need to hand over to the next generation not an erased legacy, but a legacy of redemption, learning from the mistakes of the past in order to avoid repeating them. To me, this is absolutely paramount and decisive today more than ever. And this is something that we should do at all levels, in universities, where thinking somehow is generated, in schools where history is studied, where you study history, in mosques, in synagogues, in churches, in families. And in the letter I wrote that the very first place where people learn history is the family. The way your parents told you their story, their past experience, little by little is going to shape your own way of reading history, of interpreting it. If they tell you their past of pain and suffering without conveying violence and hatred, that is a memory of redemption, a redemptive memory. Instead, if they convey also anxiety, hatred, resentment, that is a toxic memory that will never ever allow the next generation to change things and to improve.
Nella sua lettera,
in your letter, you speak of a strong sense of belonging, yet one that is neither rigid nor defensive. How can we respect those who are different without creating polarization, whilst remaining, faithful to our faith? What is, in your experience, the authentic interfaith dialogue, interreligious dialogue? Oh my gosh. Well, if I'm a sort of a serene Christian, I'm not afraid of meeting somebody else. I do not feel threatened by the other. If I'm a convinced Christian, that does not mean being against the other. I'm happy with what I am. I'm grateful for the faith I got. I want to experience and proud and passionate about my faith. And because of that, I can encounter the other without prejudice, without complexes of any kind. So to me, a strong identity, not a rigid identity. This is something different. A strong, serene, well-rooted, beautiful identity makes you free to meet anybody in a free, beautiful, and serene way. This is what I mean. I mean, what we need today is this. We are surrounded by so many fears. Fears are never a good sign, because if I'm afraid, if I'm frightened by the other, regardless of who the other is, it means that I'm lacking something, that I feel threatened by the other. I'm afraid that the other is going to take something away from me. But if I'm happy with what I am, well, I won't be afraid. Instead, I feel full of things to give and donate. So, interreligious dialogue. So, I don't like this expression because religions are abstract, do not talk. So, I mean, believers dialogue and interact. People who have a faith can exchange and talk and share a dialogue. Well, then, if you start from your own experience of faith, you can exchange with somebody else. So faith is something that is not, I mean, closed into a person. It needs to be communicated. So that is why interreligious dialogue is important. And then we also need a dialogue among communities of believers. If I may, I would say that so far this kind of interreligious dialogue has been among elites, Christian, Muslim, Jewish elites. Well, maybe this is the reason why we have so many problems in the Holy Land, because it didn't reach out to the communities. So it was limited to imam, priests, rabbis. Instead, it should trickle down to communities, especially after October the 7th, after the Gaza war. We can't go back to the past, to things as they were. Too many, misunderstandings, too many scars. When I talk, it's not Pierbattista who talks. Too many ones. When I talk, is my community, is my church. Well, I would like to meet rabbis and imams that represent their communities, because it makes such a great difference. We need to start from there. Okay, I'm part of the Pontifical Commission for Dialogue, and okay, that's fine. But again, that is limited. We need to create opportunities, in the field. We need to make communities meet, because it's there where you can really create something beautiful and something different.
Last year, with the support of our teacher Milena De Luigi, that introduced us to this topic, decided to adopt a Palestinian girl in addition to two other sponsorships that we had already set earlier. I wanted to ask you whether this gesture can contribute to disseminating peace and closeness, even in people and lands that are far from us, and if it can be useful. Well, absolutely yes. I can't remember where I mentioned this in the letter, but I talked about empathy. Empathy means establishing relations, feel close to each other. Of course, that physically it is hard to be there. Not everybody can go there, even if it could be good to go and be there. Anyway, these sponsorships, these relations are helpful. They won't change geopolitics, of course, but they are helpful in those contexts where we are, where you can get to. They are small lights, small testimonies that help not to keep inside this vicious circle of solitude and feeling victims. So these are important windows that must be kept open. I repeat, they won't change geopolitics, but they will change the life of those people and maybe your life too.
Your Eminence, this is a hard question. You describe in your letter the Garden of Eden, a symbol of humanity that is in a state of primitive, solitary innocence. You affirm that the history of salvation concludes, strikingly, in a completely different way. In a way mirrored, but with a city, a new Jerusalem. Why Jerusalem? Why not a garden?
Wow, beautiful question. I'll try to be brief, otherwise we'll have to stay here until tomorrow morning. You have time, Eminence. Well, before starting, I was told that we have to stick to the time, and now you tell me that we have time. Well, you always blame journalists, the journalist says. Well, the history of salvation and the desire of God for man, that is our salvation, is not to go back to the solitude of the Garden of Eden, as if we had to erase all our history and what humanity did in its history, because our history, our humanity, what we have done, is part of God's plan. So it must not be erased. And the city encapsulates all of this. I was saying that the view of salvation is a complex community, a diverse and complex community, but it is also reconciled. And the city is a bit of all of this. There is no perfect city. In all cities, there's many contradictions and many possibilities of life. And there's no city in the Bible that gathers in it so many accusations, so many blames on the prophets, but also many consolations and many blessings. And Jerusalem includes all of this. And Jerusalem, why Jerusalem? Jerusalem is an image, is a symbol. First of all, Jerusalem is a place that collects all the history of salvation. Remember that it is a history of salvation. There is no event without a place. The place is fundamental, and Jerusalem is such a place that collects all the salvation. And for us Christians, the death and resurrection of Christ is the heart of our salvation. But it's not just that. In the Apocalypse, the New Jerusalem is mentioned. It is not a new city. It is not Babel. Just to mention Magnifica Humanitas, that is a city without God. The celestial Jerusalem is a city that descends from the sky. It is a gift from God. This community, this being together, this being community, being a city, is not done by us, by ourselves. God gives it to us. It is a gift of God, but we have to build it. And there is this beautiful description, the city that descends from the sky, it is a gift of God, whose doors are always open to everybody. However, the heart is the Easter, is the resurrection, is the Lamb. That's the heart of the city of Jerusalem. And it has a specific duty, healing nations. There is no mention of what? Just healing, any form of illnesses, any kinds of illnesses. And the heart is the Lamb. It is what keeps this city alive, is not a form of power. It is a life donated for love. So, Easter. Jerusalem is all this. If you don't like Jerusalem as a city, you can put your city. It will be the same. You can put the church. You can place your community, which is still invited to experience that dream. That's the dream that God has for us. But that dream, that waiting, is also our homework. It is the indication of how to build a city according to the dream of God. And what we are compelled to do is to pull our desire to build a society with the dream of God. That is Jerusalem. And Jerusalem is not just conflict, it's also vocation. And it expresses very well the vocation of any city, any community, and of our church.
Altre domande? Avete anche altre domande?
Do you have any other questions, maybe resulting from what His Eminence just said tonight? Well, speaking of Jerusalem, you also talk about the sinners who are excluded from Jerusalem. So is it right to love those who embrace evil, who do harm, and how to love those who do harm and sin, and how can we forgive? Well, now we can stay another hour with this question. Well, what I meant is that vocation is a choice. So Jerusalem vocation, the style of the celestial city is a choice. It's something you can embrace or not. We are all sinners. And the celestial Jerusalem is also a place where you can encounter the mercy of God. So refusing, denying means a sort of aware choice. So being out of that, being out of the choice. So the gates of the city are open, but I'm not interested in being inside those walls. I want to be outside. This is what I mean with what I said, and this is important also to us, because we need to welcome anybody, but those who want to stay inside the city needs to accept then the logic of the Lamb, because if you refuse the logic of the Lamb, you cannot stay in the city. If you refuse the logic of the life donated for love, you cannot stay. Well, it's not because we do not love you, it's not because we refuse you, but because your attitude, your life attitude is not compatible. The right choices to be made, responsibilities to be taken on. Well, responsibility seems to be a sort of taboo word. It's always about somebody else's responsibility, never ours. But if you accept to live and stay in the city, then you need to take up your own responsibilities. Those who refuse all that, well, make a choice. Well, the gates remain open. The willingness to welcome is always there. Loving doesn't mean justifying. Loving means being there, ready to welcome, without, being naive. There are yes and no to be said. There are choices to be made. And well, as to forgiveness, well, this is a different story. Yeah, I'll try to be as short as possible. I wrote it also into letter. Forgiveness is a key tool. The forgiveness results from the encounter with God, from the cross, that makes you able to forgive your brother. And again, we should never make confusion, because at personal level, forgiveness is timeless. You can always forgive at all times. We have so many testimonies of people that were able to forgive their perpetrators, the person that made them suffer. But when it comes to social level, things are different. Timing is different. You need to be able to wait. You need to somehow make a community ready to understand what happened, assess what happened, heal, and maybe then forgive. So these are two different levels. So the stepping stones are these. So people who are personally able to forgive are living stepping stones, also for communities. But for communities, it's harder. It takes longer to forgive, but it's not impossible, and it's always needed. That is why testimonies are key, as well as the ability of pastors to guide and lead their communities towards healing of memory, healing of wounds, without forgetting them, in order then one day to be able to hug, to forgive, because then that marks a new birth for everybody.
Io avrei un'ultima domanda.
I have a last question.
ancora.
Yes, we have a very last question, just 2 minutes. 1:45. Yes, I'll be very, very quick. My question is, how can we awaken people from the sleep of indifference? Many people seem to be very far from this topic. It's impossible to make them understand. How can we somehow wake them up? Well, I'm not that worried, because passion is infectious. It's not through complicated speeches. Enthusiasm, joy, friendship, passion. Those are infectious things. And also, not everybody can understand you. Well, who follows you is welcome, and the others are also welcome, but pray for them if they cannot understand you. Well, we should never act for the result, but we should act because of a desire to do so. Thank you, examiners. Thank you to Lucia, Grant, and Kirill. We know how desire is important, and the driver of creating a different humanity. So I invite here on stage the president of the Meeting Foundation for the Friendship Among Peoples, Mr. Bernhard Scholz, to officially close this edition that has been really special because of the visit of Pope Leo, and we know that future is not a threat, is a promise to be kept. Thank you, His Eminence. Thank you for your realism resulting from faith and showing faith. And also thanks to our friends from Italy, the US, and Ukraine. Thank you also to the journalist Alessandra Buzzetti. So we have come to the end of this meeting, but I'm here to talk about the next edition of the meeting. So we are about to reveal the title of the next edition. So reading two parts of the communication release that we shared with the press this morning. And so I want to read it out loud because I don't want to risk to be moved, and I really would like to avoid that. So the awareness of a renewed sense of responsibility and a deep gratitude accompany us as this edition draws to a close. The 2026 meeting has confirmed the historic task that the Holy Father reaffirmed to be a crossroads for the Church and for society, a meeting that multiplies encounters and inspires new paths. So the visit of Leo XIV will go down in history. Endless gratitude goes to the Holy Father for the great warmth he showed in meeting the people of the meeting, visitors and volunteers alike. It was a great celebration, one that exceeded all our expectations, lived and shared by everyone with joy and enthusiasm, by children, young people, and adults. We were able to welcome the Holy Father with gratitude, but even before that, we felt welcomed by him. The theme, the love which moves the sun and the other stars, inspired conferences, exhibitions, performances, debates, and informal conversations, sending a message to the men and women of this world. It is possible to face the challenges of our time and to build peace through dialogue, setting out in search of what is true and just without censoring anything, as we just heard this evening. The reflections that unfolded over these 6 days in Rimini found an unexpected depth in the light of the encyclical Magnificat Humanitas and of the Holy Father's address, which will mark the history of the meeting. His words open up a broad and compelling horizon for our commitment to a future lived as a promise and not a threat, as we just heard by Alessandra Buzzetti. For this reason, the 48th edition of the Meeting for Friendship Amongst Peoples, to be held from August 20th to August 25th, 2027, will be titled Courageous Pioneers to Take Care of the Human Person. Taking care of the human person is the encouragement expressed by the Pope with his beautiful encyclical. It is a task that is up to each and every one of us, everywhere, in places of work, in families, in the communities, so in political contexts. So taking care of the human person is not just about preserving something. It's a way to relaunch the humanity. We need, as pioneers, rediscover how it is possible in new forms and modes. That's why we use the word pioneers. That seems to be somehow a contradiction with respect to taking care. That's the reason for this title. Thank you very much for your presence. Thank you all. So have a safe trip home. See you next year, August 20th. Save the date.
Questo è un luogo che genera dialogo,
Qualcuno che si impegna, che si batte.
che approfondisce la conoscenza e sostiene la fiducia. È un crocevia dove si incontra chi desidera il vero, il bello, il giusto e il bene. È una testimonianza di speranza nel cuore ferito del presente. E tutto questo
Proporre con la propria vita.
esiste anche grazie a te.
In mezzo al rumore serve qualcosa che duri.
E il Papa Leon XIV.
Storie vere. Incontri che cambiano la vita. Persone che costruiscono. Uno sguardo originale su ciò che accade. Tutto questo è Tracce. Ora anche in una nuova versione digitale. Per raccontare sempre più storie di gente che vive. Tracce, la rivista internazionale di Comunione e Liberazione.
Consorzio La Cascina. Ristorazione, global service, costruzioni, servizi alla persona. Promuoviamo l'impresa mutualistica e il benessere della comunità. I numeri di una grande realtà. Oltre 650 milioni di fatturato, più di 16.000 lavoratori. Vivenda. Ristorazione per mense scolastiche, ospedali, aziende e comunità. Global Service. La Cascina Costruzioni. Realizziamo come impresa o general contractor infrastrutture e grandi opere edilizie. Medi Hospes. Assistenza, accoglienza, cura. Da sempre al fianco dei più fragili. Consorzio La Cascina. Cuore da cooperativa, testa da impresa.
In mezzo al rumore serve qualcosa che duri.
E il Papa Leon XIV.
Storie vere. Incontri che cambiano la vita. Persone che costruiscono. Uno sguardo originale su ciò che accade. Tutto questo è tracce. Ora anche in una nuova versione digitale. Per raccontare sempre più storie di gente che vive. Tracce, la rivista internazionale di comunione e liberazione.
Consorzio La Cascina. Ristorazione, global service, costruzioni, servizi alla persona. Promuoviamo l'impresa mutualistica e il benessere della comunità. I numeri di una grande realtà. Oltre 650 milioni di fatturato, più di 16.000 lavoratori. Vivenda. Ristorazione per mense scolastiche, ospedali, aziende e comunità. Global Service. La Cascina Costruzioni. Realizziamo come impresa o general contractor infrastrutture e grandi opere edilizie. Medi Hospice. Assistenza, accoglienza, cura. Da sempre al fianco dei più fragili. Consorzio La Cascina. Cuore da cooperativa, testa da impresa.